Good evening, dear students. Welcome to the second part of the topic female reproductive system. Okay, so last lecture we have covered the anatomy and physiology of ovary, right? And we also gone through the various stages of follicular development in the ovary, right? So moving toward the second structure, right? So that is fallopian tubes, right? For fallopian tube is also referred as oviduct, and it is also referred as you can say uterine tube, right? So these are three names, right, which are alternatively being used. Location, definitely it is extending from the periphery of each ovary to the uterus, right. So the this part, right, which is towards the ovary, that is an open end, okay, and it is not exactly attached to the ovary. That is why I am saying that it is an open end because it helps in the collection of ovum, and then it extends up to uterus, right, where it actually joins the uterus, okay. So both side of the uterus you have fallopian tubes, right, that are being connecting. Length is approximately 10 to 12 centimeter. You can consider this is almost identical, just like vas deferens, right. Even function here is also just similar to the vas deferens. Vas deferens carry the sperm cell, right, from the testis to the, you can say that, ejaculatory duct, right. And in case of fallopian tube, it is helping in the transportation of ovum, right, actually secondary oocyte towards the uterus, fine. So that is a similarity, right. Actually it is not identical, but then it is similarity, fine. Function is definitely it helps in transportation of ova from ovaries to the uterus, right. And there are three parts, right, which are present in the fallopian tube. Different parts we will discuss, we will identify and we will discuss, okay. So let us start with the first one, that is infundibulum, right. Infundibulum is a funnel shaped structure, broad structure, right, of the oviduct. So initial part towards the ovary, which is an open end, right, and it is of funnel shape, that is called as a infundibulum, okay. Let us check a diagram. You can just see that this is the part, right, here it has been mentioned, yeah, this. So this is fallopian tube, okay. There are three parts of the fallopian tube. First part is referred as a infundibulum, right. Infundibulum, you also can consider this name, right. We have discussed in the earlier lecture of endocrine system that infundibulum is a part which connects hypothalamus with the pituitary gland, fine. So it is a connecting part. So here also you can consider just like that, it is a connecting part, fine. On the anterior end, right, this infundibulum, you can just see here there are finger like projections, and this finger like projections, they are called as a fimbriae, right. So this fimbriae is so close to the ovary, it is not physically connected, but then it is so close to the ovary, so that wherever there is an ovulation, right, on the 14th day of menstrual cycle, right, considering that on an average it is a 28 days of a menstrual cycle, right. So at 14th day there is ovulation. So wherever there is an ovulation, that secondary oocyte is, you can say, collected by the movement of fimbriae. If you just see that previous video, right, in previous lecture I have shown one a video presentation, right, which was showing the collection of the secondary oocyte, right. So that same you can consider here. So this name is also important, fimbriae. Above this infundibulum, right, if you go ahead, right, this side in the fallopian tube, there is a broader part, right, that is called as ampulla, right. That we will check later on, right, but then this is ampulla, and this part is called as a isthmus, right, that is a narrow part which connects this uterus, right, connects to the uterus, right. So these two part we will check later on. Right now focusing on the infundibulum. So as I told you that it is very close to the ovary, but it is not attached to it, right. So let us check one more diagram by which you will be able to understand it very clearly. So this is the diagram, you can just see that this is ovary, these are fimbriae, and this fimbriae are very close towards the ovary, right. You can just see that. I hope now it is very clear to you, okay. So it is a finger like projection, yeah, this is the description, fine. So if someone asks the anterior part of infundibulum which is having finger like projection, your answer will be fimbriae. Function, definitely it help in the collection of the ovum after ovulation, right. So this is regarding the infundibulum part. Now moving towards the ampulla. Now ampulla is a word we have discussed many a times. In anatomy, wherever there is a bulged part, swollen part, that is usually referred as a, identified as a ampulla. Say for example in inner ear you have semicircular canals, and semicircular canal also in the very starting part you have bulged part, that you refer it as what? That is called as the ampulla. Even in digestive system you must have learned hepatopancreatic duct, right, that opens in the duodenum, and there you have ampulla of Vater. So ampulla is a very common word, right, that we use. So here is a bulged part, wider part of the oviduct, right, and the junction between these two, that is ampulla and isthmus, is very important, right, here, somewhere here. So this junction is called as a, because it is between these two ampulla and isthmus, it is referred as a ampullary isthmic junction, okay. And ampullary isthmic junction is a site of fertilization. That means if the ova, right, that is secondary oocyte released from this part move towards the fimbriae, infundibulum, towards the ampulla, and somewhere here in ampullary isthmic junction, and if simultaneously sperms which are entering from the vagina, right, the process by which sperm are released in the vagina, that is called as the insemination. So once there is insemination, the sperm will move towards the cervix, then towards the uterus. Some of the sperm will go towards this side, some of this will go towards this side, because ovum is released by alternate ovaries, remember. So consider that this ovary has released an ovum, right. So sperm will now move towards, and simultaneously if ovum is also present here, and if they meet, then and then it will result in a pregnancy, okay. So we have discussed the path of fertilization, the path of semen, path of sperm, and path of ova, right. If simultaneously they are together at ampullary isthmic junction, then it will result in fertilization, otherwise not. Now this is practically possible that if copulation or intercourse is done somewhere between 11th to the 17th of the menstrual cycle, right, considering date first is the starting for the menses, right, where the menses are observed. Total duration is 28 days. So definitely if date 1 is for the starting of the menstruation cycle, then on the 14th day definitely there is ovulation. Now because it is a biological process, there is a chance of variation, and you have to consider plus or minus 3 days. So between 11th to the 17th day of the menstrual cycle, right, if there is insemination, right, and that sperm, right, if they are reaching to this side, then simultaneous movement of ovum, this will result in fertilization, and this could result in a pregnancy, right. So only these days are considered as the dates for conception, right, where the pregnancy could happen, otherwise there is no chance of conception, right. So this is again natural method, right. So definitely it's not a foolproof method, right. There are lots of other methods, right, which are mentioned in family planning. This is not a point of discussion for methods of family planning, so I am not going into detail. What is of our importance is ampullary isthmic junction, fine. Moving towards the third part, that is isthmus, right. S is silent, right, it is not isthmus, it is called as a isthmus. So isthmus is a narrow part, right, a narrow part, and the last part of the, you can say, oviduct, and then ultimately it joins with the uterus, okay. So this is uterus, right, a single uterus that is present in the human, and definitely this part, right, why it is called as a isthmus, that also is interesting, because it is a narrow part which is connecting the uterus, right. Normally in layman language also isthmus is referred as, say for example, on either side there is a water and you have a narrow path, a narrow land between, right, piece of land which is separating water on the either side, that is called as a isthmus, right. So similarly here also this structure, right, is joined by this narrow part, and that is why you call it as a, you identify it as a isthmus, right. So these are regarding the various, you can say, anatomical you can say division, right, parts of the fallopian tube, right. Ovulation, definitely we have referred that wherever there is a rupture of Graafian follicle to release the secondary oocyte from the ovary, right, that is called as a ovulation, and once it is released, definitely this collected ovum will move towards the fallopian tube, right. But then you need to you can say ask yourself that how this structure is moved, or you can say will be able to move in the fallopian tube, right. Now why I am asking this question is because this is a quite huge structure, right, huge, because it is largest cell of the human, right, secondary oocyte, right, that is released from the, you can say that this Graafian follicle, right, and definitely it is going to form ovum somewhere if it is fertilized. Then this structure as such, it is having cell membrane. This cell membrane is covered by one special layer of an extracellular matrix which we have discussed in the last lecture, that is called as zona pellucida, and this zona pellucida is having few more cells which are granulosa cells. I am drawing only few of these cells which are arranged radially, right, and that radially arranged cells, they are referred as a corona radiata, right. I am not that good in diagram, you all know that, and it is even harder to draw a diagram with a mouse, right, on a video lecture, right. So consider that this is a secondary oocyte that is released, right. Why I am showing this concern is because this is a quite large cell, right. Again you need to refer some details of cell division here, because meiosis, definitely the reductional cell division will occur here, and in reductional cell division, right, wherever you have cell division you have two processes, karyokinesis and cytokinesis, right. So what is karyokinesis? Definitely it is you can say movement of nucleus, or in other words division of nucleus. So division of nucleus in case of oogenesis is definitely equal, right. 46 chromosome will be divided equally into 23 chromosomes, two different cells and 23 chromosome in each of this cell. But cytokinesis in the process of oogenesis is not equal, right. That means cytoplasm will be given to a cell in a huge amount, to a larger extent. Most of the cytoplasm will move towards one cell, and rest of the cell, the second cell, will not receive the cytoplasm, right, and that cell we refer as a polar body, right, while this cell is the secondary oocyte, right. So that is because to increase the chances of survival of the secondary oocyte, okay. And also not to forget that sperm is otherwise is having a negligible amount of cytoplasm. So at the time of formation of zygote, right, that is fertilized egg, that case cytoplasm is received by ovum only, secondary oocyte only. So remember that cytokinesis is unequal, and that is the reason why this is largest cell of the human body. On the other side, sperm is the smallest cell of the human body, right. And why the smaller cell? Because the size has to be small if it wants to move, right. You know that sperm is a motile cell, and if a cell wants to be a motile structure, definitely it has to be smaller in a size, right. While in case of ovum, it is larger, it is largest cell of the body. So if this, you can say, so much of, you can say, big structure is there, and you want to move towards the fallopian tube, right, it is definitely a tough job. So how to move such, you can say that big structure, right. So in that case, remember that there is a ciliary movement, okay. Now there are various types of movement that could be observed in cells, right. Say for example phagocytosis, you have amoeboid movement, muscles, right, definitely you have movement of actin, myosin. Similarly, some cells are specialized in our body, they do have cilia like appendages on their cell membrane, and that helps in ciliary movement, right, stroke recovery, right, stroke recovery, right. Likewise the movement is there, and this movement, as you can see the diagram, right, this is the diagram which shows the ciliary movement, right. So because just see some of the cells are secretory and some of the cell is clearly having presence of cilia, and this helps in the movement of large structure, that is secondary oocyte, right. Without this cilia, movement is not possible. This is again in contradiction with the vas deferens. Vas deferens, there is peristalsis movement which helps in the movement of sperm. Also the case sperm itself themselves have a flagella, so that definitely will result in the motility, right. So two case, and that is the reason why vas deferens does not have ciliary movement, right. There is no movement that is been contributed by the vas deferens, right, for the motility of the sperm, while in case of definitely ovum, the movement is completely due to the ciliary movement, right, that is present in the ciliated columnar epithelial cells of fallopian tubes, right. This is a screenshot that I have taken from a, you can say that the animation, right, where the movement of egg in a fallopian tube is being shown. You can just see that these are the cilia, right, and that helps in the movement of this structure, large structure. I hope it is now very clear to you. Okay. So ultimately fallopian tubes from both sides will join and then they will form the uterus, right. So what is the site of fertilization, right? Now you all should be able to speak, you all should be able to memorize that it is a ampullary isthmic junction, right. If there is a simultaneous movement of sperm and secondary oocyte, then and if they are meeting at this site, then and then it will result in fertilization, it will result in conception. Okay, that is pregnancy. Fine. So with this we have completed all the details related to the fallopian tube. Now we will move towards a next topic of discussion, and that is uterus, right. Uterus in a common language is also referred as a womb, and location it is between urinary bladder and rectum, right. This also will be a case in case of vagina, right, because in case of female there is a separate urinary tract. Okay, urinary bladder is there and there is an extension of urethra, right. Remember that in case of female, urethra just carries the urine, there is no gamete or ovum that is passing from the. In case of male, urethra was a common passage for you can say that urine as well as you can say that the sperm, right. Here it is not like that. So there is urinary system. On the posterior side there is definitely last part of your digestive tract, that is rectum, and in between that, right, in the pubic region, in between that there is location of uterus and vagina. Okay, this we will learn in a diagram, that is lateral view of the female reproductive system. That then you will be very clear with this location. Okay, structure, the shape is almost a piriform structure. Piriform, it refers to inverted pear shaped structure, right. So you can just see that this is a inverted pear shaped structure, right, very easy, very clear to you, right, you are easily able to identify it, right, and it is having a thick walled muscular structure, right. Now we will check this in the latter diagram. There are 3 layers of the uterus, and this out of these 3 layers, the middle layer, that is very thick and that is made up of smooth muscle, that is referred as a myometrium. We will check that in the next slide. Okay, just like ovary, this also is supported by ligament, right. Uterus is also supported by ligaments which are attached to the pelvic wall, right. Again, ligament here does not mean that a tissue which connects 2 bones, right. Normally it is meant by that, but here you have to understand in a way that it is as strong as ligament, right. That is what you need to understand. Fine. So importance, definitely it is site of many important physiological events, like say for example menstruation. Now menstruation, you know that it is the cyclic changes, physiological changes, right, which are because of the hormones that happens in case of female reproductive system. But then when there is presence of menses, what is actually removed from the body? It is this part, right, that is the internal layer of uterus, which is referred as a endometrium, that is been slogged off, right, that is falling off, and along with that it will take lots of mucus, lots of blood, right, and that is what is observed as a menses. What is the reason? Definitely when there is development of corpus luteum. You remember in last lecture we have referred in the various stages of the development of the follicles, and in that case just after the ovulation, corpus hemorrhagicum, there was formation of a glandular body that you called as a corpus luteum. When a corpus luteum is when a corpus luteum is formed, it leads to you can say that synthesis, or it will now synthesize progesterone. Now what is role of progesterone? It is a pregnancy maintaining hormone. So even if whether there is a fertilization or no fertilization, it will prepare uterus for implantation. Okay, what it will do is it will make the endometrium thick and glandular. It will develop endometrium, so that by chance if fertilization is there, that fertilized egg now could be implanted within the endometrium. Once it is fixed in the endometrium, now there are lots of blood vessels which can give a nutrition, right. Without blood you know that organogenesis cannot happen, right. But if this fertilization has not happened, right, and in that case definitely now this endometrium has to be removed, right. So corpus luteum only stays for 9 days. If fertilization is not there, corpus luteum will only stay for 9 days, and in that case after 9 days it will slowly convert to corpus albicans. Now there is no progesterone, no estrogen, right, no FSH and no LH. So that overall all hormones, right, which are present in the blood, they are normally, as compared to normal, they are now at lower level, and in absence of such hormones it will result in, you can say, slogging of the endometrial lining, and that is what you call as a menstruation, right. So menstruation cycle, this is a cycle which is observed in the, you can say, the cyclic changes which are observed in the endometrium, right. This is a definition of menstrual cycle, right. Cyclic changes are happening in the endometrium of the uterus, fine. Also, as we have said, that it is a site for implantation of fertilized ovum, right. If fertilization happens, then definitely the fertilization will happen only, or it will be implanted in the endometrium only, which is a part of uterus. Now this is regarding normal pregnancy. It is possible that some of the rare cases, right, because of either hormonal disturbances or some other event, the implantation occurs at other site, right, other than the endometrium, and such type of pregnancy, right, if implantation occurs other than the uterus, then such type of pregnancies, they are referred as ectopic pregnancies. Ectopic means the site is somewhere else, just like, say, for example, in case of heart, normally what you have is this SA node which is creating the impulse, and that is what you call as a pacemaker. But if heartbeat is originated at some other place, what do you call? You call it as an ectopic foci. The focus is somewhere else, and that's how the name ectopic pregnancy is also. Ectopic pregnancies are a challenge for the gynecologist, right. They are also very painful, and you need to take lots of, you can say, precautions, right, but we will not go in that details, right. Moving toward the third important phenomena, that is development of embryo, right. If implantation happens in endometrium, definitely development of embryo also will occur in uterus, it is but obvious, fine. So it will stay there for 9 months, and then eventually it will be, you can say, once it is been ready, right, once it is mature, now it is definitely ready, right, to go into outer atmosphere, right. So three important you can say events that you can consider for uterus, right, we will revise. First, definitely it is site for menstruation, right, whatever changes happens, that are definitely in the endometrium. Second is implantation, right, it is site for implantation for fertilized egg, fertilized ovum, and third is definitely development of embryo, right. So now moving towards the internal structure of the uterus. Wall of uterus is made up of 3 layers, right. So endo refers to inner, and metrium, wherever the word is there, it means uterus, okay. So endometrium, that is innermost layer of the uterus. Similarly, myometrium, myo, here you have to refer it as a muscle, right, actually it is middle part, but this middle part is made up of thick smooth muscle layer, right. You know myology, myo refers to muscles, right, myology refers to study of muscles. So myometrium, it is a part of uterus, right, which is thick smooth muscle layer, right. And similarly this epimetrium or peri, epi refers to outer, or peri also refers to the one which is located on the periphery, right, that's why epimetrium, perimetrium, okay. So endometrium, here you can just see that this is a diagram, right, very easily you can locate. This is a inner glandular structure, right, having lots of blood vessel, that's why I have shown slightly darker part, right. This is the upper part of the uterus, which is called as a uterine fundus. This is the cavity within the uterus, so that's why uterine cavity, and this is the body part of the fundus, right. So here a thick part which you are observing here, they represent a very strong muscles, right, and that are, because that the smooth muscles of the uterus, right. Remember that without this muscle, contraction of this muscle is actually helping in the childbirth, right. So delivery of the baby, right, could only occur when this muscle get contracted under the influence of 2 hormones, right. That 2 hormones are referred as, definitely one is oxytocin and second is prostaglandins, right. Prostaglandin, namely it is PGF2 alpha, which you will learn in higher semester, right. So prostaglandin, oxytocin, together they will initiate fetal ejection reflex, and later on it is the oxytocin which will continuously contract the, you can say that uterus, to make the childbirth you can say happening, fine. So endometrium, as I told you, that it is an inner glandular layer, that lines the uterine cavity. Definitely if fertilization happen, then definitely fertilized egg is implanted here and it will reside until the further development. But if there is no conception, right, if woman does not conceive, then in that case endometrial lining slogs off. This is under hormonal influence. All hormones, progesterone, estrogen are at least level, and that will result in because a loss of this endometrial lining, and that normally happens periodically, and that is what you observe as a menses, right, after every 28 days. That is what you call as a menstrual cycle, right. So the changes that happens in case of menstrual cycle, they are related with the endometrium, right. Moving towards the second one is myometrium. As I told you, it is a middle thick layer of a smooth muscle, and definitely that exhibits a strong contraction of delivery of baby. Now this we have learned in the case of endocrine system, but again I am revising, right. Wherever the 9-month phase is completed, right, there are 3 trimesters in the pregnancy. So after completion of 3rd trimester, right, the fetus is now mature, and this mature fetus will start producing some hormones, right. So there is initially release of prostaglandin and oxytocin, and that starts an event which is referred as a fetal ejection reflex. So once there is a contraction of uterus, because this both will produce strong contraction, and in that case this contraction will send a message to cervix, because just on the, you can say, anterior side, right, that on the downwards, right, towards the uterus, towards the vagina, there is presence of a structure, narrow structure, which you call as a cervix. So just after uterus you have presence of cervix. In cervix also there are some receptors, because uterus is contracted, it will put pressure on cervix and cervix will be dilated. Once there is a dilatation of cervix, there is presence of stretch receptors. These stretch receptors again will send message to the brain, to the posterior pituitary gland, and posterior pituitary gland, it will stimulate to release more oxytocin. So this is a positive feedback loop. More the contraction of oxytocin, right, of the smooth muscle by oxytocin, more will be the dilatation by cervix. More the dilatation, more will be sensed by the stretch receptors, and that message is sent to the hypothalamus, where it will release more oxytocin. This is a rare event in a body that results in a positive feedback loop, and this process definitely is also facilitated by estrogen, because in presence of estrogen, oxytocin receptors are increased manifold, okay. And this is one of the rare, there are actually 2 positive feedback cycle, one is regarding oxytocin, second is estrogen, okay. So regarding oxytocin we have discussed, fine. This process actually takes very long time, and that's why childbirth, right, delivery of baby, if it's a normal delivery, then it takes maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, 5 hours, because the positive feedback loop is definitely going on within the body. To shorten this duration, most of the time nowadays doctor, they, once this fetal ejection reflexes have been started, they give injection of oxytocin to the female, so that this phase can be reduced, right, along, because the pain is intolerable, right. So quite a huge amount, you can say the pain that is because of the childbirth is definitely cannot be expressed in words, right. આપણા શાસ્ત્રોમાં એને મરણતોલ્ય જે છે કહી શકાય દુખાવો, એ પ્રકારનું જે છે એને કીધું છે, right. So that sort of pain is happening, and to reduce that pain, right, definitely this oxytocin injection will help, okay. So that is regarding the oxytocin. Third layer is definitely epimetrium, perimetrium, which is an outer covering, protective thin membranous layer, right. That is what the uterus is, right. Now you should also be knowing the type of uterus, right. There are actually many types of uterus have been there in various animals, but we will focus on 2 types, right. One is duplex, because there are 2 uterus, that's why you call it as a duplex, and simplex. Simplex, as the name is simplex, but then it is highly complicated or highly, you can say that a developed structure that you can consider. So there is a single uterus, that's why you are referring as a simplest, otherwise it is showing the highest level of development, right. Duplex is present in some of the lower animals like you can say that rat, right, which is representing very simple type because there are 2 separate and independent type of uterus, and they open independently into the vagina, right, through 2 separate openings. If you will go for a higher studies, maybe post graduation, and that also in pharmacology, you will come across dissection of the animals, and then if you check in the pelvic cavity, a Y-shaped structure, uterus, you can easily observe in the rat. Okay, so that is a duplex type, right? As such, in case of rat, there are many ovum that are released during the process of oogenesis, and this ovum will, if fertilized, definitely then they will grow as an embryo, separate embryo in these two uterus, right? So that's why number of pups in rats are more. In case of human, normally it is we give birth to single child, but in case of animals you have many child, right? That is pup, and that is one of the reason is the uterus is duplex. Okay, so second is simplex. Definitely here both uterus are fused. Now why they are fused, or why we are saying that this is the highest level of development? Because if two uterus are fused, definitely the wall of this thick wall of the uterus, the contraction will help in the childbirth. Also this complete structure that is formed because of the fusion of two uterus, that will allow maximum growth, right, which increases chances of survival of the fetus within the female's body, right, within the uterus, right. So that is why we say that it is most developed type of a uterus, and that is what is observed in case of human. Okay, so with this we have completed these two topic. Now very small short of a description, right, as such it is not small, still it will take maybe 30-35 minutes, but as we have discussed that we will limit our lecture up to 30-35 minutes. So I am limiting up to this, my discussion up to these topics. Next 4 topics we will discuss definitely in the last lecture, in the next lecture. That will be a last part of this female reproductive system. Okay, there is an assignment for you, right? So assignment is not a burden, right? Do not consider it as a burden, just take it as a positive way so that you can gain some knowledge. Okay, we have definitely gone through a process of oogenesis, right, that is follicular development in this you can say ovary, and in that case I want an answer from you that throughout the life of a female, right, functionally reproductive life, right, functionally active reproductive life, that is the age what you can consider as a between menarche to menopause. Menarche, that is the phase where the menstrual cycle is initiated, right, that is normally at this age of puberty between 11 to 13 years. Okay, and menopause is a phase that is observed because of aging, due to aging. These ovaries now will become rudimentary, right, so in that case they become non-functional, and in that case oogenesis process is stopped, and that is observed within somewhere between 45 to 50 years age, right. Meno refers to menstrual cycle, pause refers to stop. So when menstrual cycle is stopped, you call it as a menopause, right. So what is a functionally active reproductive age in case of female? It is between somewhere 11 to 13 years, right, from where it is started, and up to 45 to 50 years. So between this phase, how many ova are released in a female? That is what you have to calculate. Okay, very easy, it will not take more than 2 minutes, and you can send your answer to me either by WhatsApp or email. Okay, આટલું તો થશે તમારાથી. ફાઇન, ચલો, થેન્ક યુ વેરી મચ. નેક્સ્ટ પાર્ટ, લાસ્ટ પાર્ટની અંદર આપણે ફરી પાછા મળીશું.